Decentralanders, this is a quick economics update on what's going on in January 2021. We've had videos on this topic before. This is just going to be an update because I think a lot of things are currently happening that are, somewhat extreme and maybe a little bit also unexpected. And I want to make sure that we keep the conversation going as we need to stay up to date on any of these developments. So I don't need to tell you, mana prices are extremely high again. They're not as high as a lot of people wish they would be, but they're significantly up. I would say 100% since the last level, comfortable level around 8, 9 cents. We are now up there 18, 19 cents, almost double in price. That means everything inside Decentraland is now twice as expensive if you calculate in US dollars. Now, if you do not calculate in US dollars, if you have significant holdings in Ethereum and you do not calculate back everything into a real world currency, you, of course, have a slightly different view on this thing. You have made a lot of gains in Ethereum in USD terms, and now you're willing to spend some of that to build a base somewhere virtually. And what better place than Decentraland? So there are different views on this topic, but it's important to understand that a lot of newcomers that are coming out of the fiat world and who are using their credit card to purchase property potentially, they will have to pay back these loans in USD terms. So if they do spend a significant amount on a small piece of land, for those guys, now to enter our world is twice as expensive. And if you compare it to 10 months ago, it's maybe even 4 times as expensive. So of course we can say that those guys who joined in February, March, April last year, they were somewhat early and they do deserve that extra bonus and that extra lower level of entry. And I agree with this, of course, because I did also join in March. But it's quite interesting to see once you have that comparison in your mind, once you have that bias at the back of your head that, hey, but this is these levels are a lot higher than what I got used to when I started, and you kind of start to make these calculations, and they might be wrong. Maybe we are at the very beginning, and maybe the sky is the limit, and maybe having these biases like I do right now might actually be a very bad foundation for making any investment decisions. I wouldn't have thought that I would say that, but it seems like that the level of rationality inside the crypto markets are really detached from any kind of foundation. So really, I don't think any rules really apply here anymore. It's really, I mean, eventually they will apply, but it seems like that the fluctuations to the downside and to the upside are disproportionate and everything is really possible. And as long as people believe and trust their circle of influence, they are ready to continue to invest even at higher levels. And I was wondering, how does Decentraland manage this, right? And I'm not talking about the team. I'm talking about the community in general and the marketplace. I would have thought initially that much higher mana prices will have an immediate impact on land and wearables prices, and they did initially. The land prices collapsed from like 25, 20 at street level land prices to 8, 9, sometimes even lower. And what's really interesting right now is even though the mana price continues to rise aggressively, those land prices are coming back. There was a period, a very quiet period, where we did not see any sales, but now with Ethereum growing aggressively in value, there have been a huge amount of sales inside Decentraland. I would say unprecedented amount of sales, at least since I joined, and the valuations are going up. We are seeing 10,000, 11,000 inland prices, and we're seeing up to 16,000 prices at street level already, and this with a much higher mana valuation. So it's really incredible how resilient this marketplace is. We definitely see that the listed prices are astronomically high. It seems like people buying land are ready to hold that land for the long term, and they do put up a very high price tag at which they're unlikely to sell, and they don't seem to mind. And this in turn kind of really creates a shortage of supply in the marketplace, and it's really hard to get a nice piece of land with a proper road connection, and I would say even beyond the road connection, but a full road attachment. It's really hard to go get a well-priced piece of land, and if you are really in the market for one, you will have to pay I wouldn't say an above average price, but you would have to pay a fair price. You are not going to get a steal very easily anymore. So I must say this is a very healthy development of the marketplace. We will have to see how this continues to develop. If mana prices should, continue to shoot up into the 30 cents region, this would potentially maybe create even more demand for land. There seems to be a tendency for an inverse relationship with the with the Ethereum ecosystem. The more adoption and the more price growth we have in the Ethereum ecosystem, the more land we seem to be able to sell at higher prices. This is, I have to be honest, slightly irrational and maybe even unexpected based on one of my first videos, but I will accept it if this is the current stage of adoption and development, and if this is not a mature market and we are maybe still in a price finding episode, and as long as people are willing to get into the game at these prices, then be my guest. Why not? So this so much on the land prices. In terms of the wearables, we also have an interesting development because the same rules apply. The higher the mana price, the more expensive are the items in USD terms. And now here we didn't even actually see a price drop. We did have a we did see a big decrease in trading volumes for several weeks. It was very quiet, especially with these very high fees, which I think have more impact on the market activity than the actual mana price. We had some real slow periods, and now we are at the core topic. Actually, it seems like right now, very often during the day, if I want to sell an item, I have to pay 15 to 20 bucks in transaction fees. If I want to update the price, it's between 6 and 7 very often. And if you want to, confirm a new collection type, you also have to pay 5 to 6 bucks very often. So this definitely has an effect on trading volumes and on profitability of trading items, especially with low priced items. If you have that many fees, you really have to calculate tight in order to still make a profit on some of your sales. If you are in there for profit, of course. But other than that, the prices haven't really changed. On the contrary, I think the prices for wearables are growing steadily, even with higher mana prices. So I think for the handful of investors out there, if you are available to pass on some of the inventory that you might have to newer participants, you can make a healthy return on your initial investment, and you can keep some of the items that you really enjoy yourself, and they will still grow in value, and you can make a decision later on if you want to sell those as well. So I think the wearables market has been extremely healthy, except for the fees that are still having a heavy impact. So if should the fees come down, I would be really curious to see what kind of impact this will have on the marketplace, because maybe more liquidity and lower fees would actually incentivize more people to trade, which would provide more liquidity and therefore maybe lower prices. So right now it is really hard to make a conclusion what the market dynamics really are. Is, some of the things seem to be very counterintuitive and have the opposite effect of what one would expect. So it's a very interesting time to be in this marketplace and to watch it. And I think this is why these kind of economical updates are of value. Yeah, I think I've covered the most important items here that I wanted to cover. Maybe one thing which I kind of touched on in one of the previous videos is that the there is a project that is called Street Names on the roadmap for Decentraland. Now I don't know how up to date that roadmap really is in 21, but should street names be introduced anytime soon, I really think we are going to see a much larger spread between road connected parcels and inland parcels. While technically both of these lands are the same in terms of how high you can build and what you can do with those, I think we are, as soon as we introduce additional value and additional uniqueness to the actual connecting streets by calling them something, all lands attached to these streets will eventually grow faster in price than the inland parcels. I think we have seen a certain equality for a long period of time, and then there was a certain spread, and I think that spread is going to continue where it really makes sense to buy into properties that are connected to a road. And now what's important also, when you are buying an estate, do pay attention that how many pieces of lands from that estate do have a road connection, right? Because you can have an estate that touches only on one side with one of the land parcels. That means that if you would split up that estate into 3 or into 4 individual lands, the other 3 or 4 would not have a road connection, meaning there would be not of such high value potentially individually. So I think this will also have an impact going forward. And now with potentially street names coming into the game, this effect should also be amplified. But again, this is a little bit of speculation just for the hardcore fans who are curious of what could potentially be going on. Okay, yeah, I think I have another point that I'm going to just pack into this video. Let's quickly talk about the Xmas items, the Christmas items that have been dropped during the 2020 events. Now, why am I packing this into the January 21 update? It's because at these events is when new supply of items is being introduced into the economy, right? So if the original Decentraland items are introduced at large capacities inside the economy, these are events that we do want to pay attention to. This is also true for the fashion show #1 and the fashion show #2 that we had. These are also important events for the wearables market, as a lot of new items enter the arena. So the last event that was significant was that Christmas event, where over several days we have seen a wide range of new items coming in, like the winter jackets, like the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the Mana sweaters, and a lot of other different items related to Christmas. And what I have paid attention to is that the mint numbers, I think those were significantly higher than last year, because last year this was still pre-launch. Only very few people took part in those events. So only very few Christmas items, such as sweaters and glasses, were actually minted in 2019. And you will therefore only see a very small supply of those items in the marketplace. And this has been slightly different this year, because this year the participation in the event with the better adoption, of course, has been significantly higher. And if you actually had a look at the people who participated, a lot of those guys were from the crypto gaming space, from Axis, from the from the digital art scene, and many of those were actually not classical Decentralanders. So many came to mine to monetize the knowledge of that this secondary marketplace for these items exists. They did collect their NFTs and then put those for sale. So I think the dynamics this year were quite a lot different from last year, and the supply is actually a lot larger. Now, whether this will have an impact on any potential resale value going forward, we will have to see. If Decentraland continues to grow, this supply will easily be absorbed by new players coming in seeking vintage items. So normally this shouldn't have a strong impact, but I think this is something you need to pay attention to, how many of those items were actually minted independently from the rarity type, right? I mean, you can have an item that can exist 1,000 times inside the game, but if it was only minted 6-7 times, it's still super rare because you just can't get that particular item. And we did have some of these scenarios even this year. So, these are some of the hints that you could pay attention to if you're curious about the economics of Decentraland. Let me see if I have anything else on my list for today. Otherwise, I will have to pack this into the next video where I'm going to talk a little bit about the DAO, about my personal updates, about the future of this channel, and about general news. No, I think I'm going to wrap this up, guys. I hope you enjoy this type of economics update. This was it for January 21. If you have any comments, if you have any concerns, if you agree or disagree, do leave me a comment. Any kind of constructive feedback is really, really welcome here on YouTube, but also on my Twitter account. Do subscribe, do like the video. As usual, this really, really helps to spread the message. I think we are doing really, really good with Decentraland. And thank you for taking the time. This was Swiss. Have a nice rest of the day, and I talk to you soon.